One of the most profound and influential myths of the ancient world is the myth of Osiris and Isis, a cornerstone of Egyptian religion, philosophy, and cultural identity. This is not merely a story about gods and magic. It is a myth that speaks to the essence of life, death, love, justice, and rebirth. It explains the divine origin of kingship, the function of the afterlife, and the eternal battle between order and chaos. Let us begin, not at the end, nor in the middle, but at the very height of harmony, a time when Egypt was ruled by the benevolent god Osiris. Osiris was more than a ruler. He was the very embodiment of civilization. According to ancient belief, it was Osiris who first taught humanity how to cultivate crops, harvest the Nile's blessings, write laws, and live in peace. Under his just reign, the land flourished. Prosperity filled the Nile Valley. The people lived with purpose and balance. By Osiris's side stood his wife and sister, the radiant goddess Isis, whose wisdom, loyalty, and magical prowess made her a revered figure in her own right. She was a healer, a protector, and a master of enchantments, perhaps the most powerful sorceress of the divine realm. Together, Osiris and Isis formed a royal couple that symbolized order, stability, and the sacred bond between king and goddess. But not all looked upon this harmony with joy. Osiris had a brother, Set, the god of deserts, storms, violence, and chaos. Set ruled over the barren lands and the howling winds, and he seethed with jealousy as he watched his brother bathed in love and power. He could not bear to see Osiris adored, while he remained feared, mistrusted, and overlooked. So, from deep within his twisted heart, Set devised a plot to usurp the throne of Egypt and plunge the world into his own dominion of disorder. His plan was subtle and cruel. Set crafted a magnificent coffin, a sarcophagus made of the finest cedar wood, inlaid with gold, and adorned with carvings of the stars and sacred symbols. It was an object of great beauty, but it was also a trap. Set threw a great banquet, inviting Osiris and many others to join in celebration. At the height of the feast, when wine had loosened tongues and laughter echoed in the halls, Set presented the coffin and announced a contest. Whoever could fit perfectly inside this splendid box would win it as a gift. Each guest tried, one by one, but the coffin was always too long or too narrow, until Osiris, unsuspecting and cheerful, stepped in. At that moment, Set and his conspirators slammed the lid shut, sealed it with molten lead, and nailed it fast. The coffin, now a tomb, was cast into the Nile, vanishing into the waters. Osiris was dead. Osid. The news shattered Isis's world. Her husband, her king, her partner in ruling a land of peace, was gone. Yet Isis did not fall into despair for long. She cut her hair in mourning and dressed in rags, disguising herself and setting out on a perilous journey. She wandered across Egypt, through villages and reed marshes, in search of the lost coffin. Her devotion knew no boundaries. After a long and arduous search, she tracked the coffin to the distant land of Byblos, modern-day Lebanon, where the currents had carried it to shore. It had become lodged in the roots of a great tamarisk tree. The tree had grown tall and strong around the coffin, eventually being cut down and used as a pillar in the palace of the king of Byblos. Isis, through her cunning and magic, entered the palace in disguise and revealed her divinity. The pillar was returned to her, and with it, the coffin containing her beloved Osiris. She brought it back to Egypt and hid it in the Nile Delta, determined to protect it from Set. But fate had other plans. Set, while hunting by moonlight, stumbled upon the coffin. Enraged, he tore open the box, pulled Osiris's body from it, and tore him into 14 pieces, scattering them across the land so he could never rise again. It was a second death, more brutal than the first. But again, Isis did not give up. With the help of her sister Nephthys, who had turned against Set, and the jackal-headed god Anubis, guardian of the dead, Isis began the sacred task of retrieving and reassembling Osiris's body. Piece by piece, She gathered his remains from the mountains, deserts, and riverbanks. She found 13 of the 14 parts. The final piece, his phallus, had been swallowed by a fish in the Nile. To restore him fully, she fashioned a new one from gold and invoked the most powerful spells of resurrection. Isis performed a ritual so sacred and profound that it became the foundation of Egyptian funerary rites. She breathed life into Osiris, not enough to return him to the world of the living, but enough for one sacred moment. In that moment, Osiris and Isis conceived a child, Horus, the falcon-headed god who would grow to challenge Set and reclaim his father's throne. Osiris could not remain in the land of the living. He descended to the Duat, the underworld, where he became its king and eternal judge. In this role, he presided over the fate of souls, weighing their hearts against the feather of Maat, the goddess of truth and balance. Those who lived with justice entered paradise. Those who did not were devoured by the monstrous goddess Amit. Meanwhile, Isis hid with her infant son Horus in the marshes, raising him in secret, protecting him from Set's wrath. She taught him courage, honor, and the wisdom of his father. When Horus came of age, he emerged from hiding and challenged Set for the right to rule Egypt. Their conflict lasted 80 years. They battled in the sky and on the earth, transforming into animals, deceiving each other, pleading their cases before the gods. Finally, the divine court of the gods, presided over by Ra and recorded by Thoth, ruled in Horus's favor. Set was cast down, though not destroyed, for chaos can never be fully eliminated. Horus took his place on the throne, and every Egyptian pharaoh thereafter was seen as his earthly embodiment, a living Horus maintaining Maat, the cosmic order. Osiris, though no longer among the living, was not lost. He reigned in the afterlife, offering hope of resurrection and eternal life to every soul who lived honorably. And Isis? She became the most revered goddess in Egypt. Her worship spread across the Mediterranean, far beyond the Nile. She was the goddess of love, magic, resurrection, and motherhood, a figure so powerful and beloved that her name lived on even into Roman times. And so, this myth, rich in symbolism, emotion, and divine power, remained one of Egypt's most enduring stories. It taught that death is not the end, that love can conquer even the grave, and that justice must eventually triumph over violence and chaos. In the tale of Osiris and Isis, we see the origin of the Egyptian soul's journey, the divine right of kings, and the sacred balance that governed the universe. We have journeyed through the myth of Osiris and Isis, a tale of love, betrayal, resurrection, and eternal kingship. But that story, as foundational as it is, was only the beginning. Like the flow of the Nile, one event leads to another in Egyptian myth. The death of Osiris was not the final note of tragedy, nor was his son's birth the ultimate triumph. What came next was a long and fierce struggle, one that would shake the heavens, test the gods, and define the rightful ruler of Egypt. And so we move now to the next great epic, the battle between Horus and Set, a divine contest between light and shadow, order and chaos, and two gods born of blood, vengeance, and destiny. After Isis resurrected Osiris and conceived Horus, she knew her child was destined for greatness. But his destiny was not secured. It had to be fought for. Set still sat upon the throne of Egypt. He had usurped it through treachery and violence, and though Osiris had returned in spirit to the underworld, the living world remained in the grip of a tyrant. Isis, with her unmatched cunning and devotion, raised Horus in secrecy, deep in the papyrus thickets of the Nile Delta, hidden from Set's spies and wrath. She nursed him, shielded him, and taught him the wisdom of the gods. He grew not only in stature, but in knowledge and strength, learning both the craft of warfare and the deep spiritual law of Ma'at, the divine order that holds the universe together. When Horus came of age, the time had come to claim his birthright. The land was out of balance. The people suffered under Set's stormy rule. Crops withered. Justice faded. It was time to act. Horus emerged from the shadows and stood before the Ennead, the council of 9 great gods, including Ra, the ancient sun god, and Thoth, the scribe and keeper of divine knowledge. Horus demanded justice. He demanded the throne. But Set, as always, was cunning and bold. He too stood before the council, declaring that Horus was too young, too untested, and too impetuous to rule. He painted himself as the seasoned leader. Stern, yes, but strong enough to hold chaos at bay. What followed was no mere courtroom drama. It was a mythic saga, a trial that unfolded across divine realms, dreams, battlefields, and transformations. For 80 years, Horus and Set contended for the throne, and the gods were not quick to decide. Their battle was physical, magical, political, and symbolic. They fought as wild beasts, once as hippos, diving into the Nile and wrestling beneath its muddy surface for days. In another episode, Horus tore out Set's testicles. In retaliation, Set gouged out Horus's eye, tearing it apart and scattering its fragments. This was no ordinary injury. The Eye of Horus, known later as the Wedjat Eye, became a powerful symbol of healing, protection, and wholeness. The god Thoth, master of knowledge and balance, gathered the fragments of the eye and magically restored them, each piece representing a sense: sight, hearing, taste, touch, and so on. The healed Eye of Horus would become one of the most sacred amulets in all of Egyptian religion. But not all battles were fought with claws and spells. Set and Horus also faced divine tests of character. In one famous tale, Set challenged Horus to prove his manhood and courage by navigating a river on boats made of stone. Clever Horus, knowing stone would sink, secretly built his boat from wood painted to look like stone. When the boats were launched, Set's vessel sank immediately, while Horus's floated. Even in trickery, Horus prevailed. Set never accepted defeat. He tried to humiliate Horus in unspeakable ways, attempting to assault him, twist the narrative, and corrupt the judgment of the gods. But Isis, the ever-watchful mother, continued to intervene, once even capturing Set and binding him in chains, only to release him out of mercy. That act caused Horus to rage at her, accusing her of compassion toward the very one who killed his father. The family was torn between justice and mercy, between vengeance and cosmic order. Eventually, after decades of struggle, the gods could no longer remain neutral. Ra was weary, torn between old loyalties and the need for harmony. It was the wise Thoth, again, who stepped forward to deliver counsel. The trial had to end. Egypt needed a king. But Ptah. The final judgment was issued. Horus would inherit the throne of his father Osiris. Set, though not destroyed, was cast down. He would remain a force of chaos, banished to the barren deserts, occasionally permitted to sail with Ra and defend the sun against the monstrous serpent Apophis. But never again would he rule the fertile lands of the Nile. Horus ascended the throne. The double crown of Upper and Lower Egypt rested upon his head. His kingship was not only divine, it was earned. It had been fought for with fire, blood, wisdom, and the restoration of cosmic balance. And from that day forward, every living pharaoh was considered the incarnation of Horus on earth, his eyes watching over the land, his wings shielding the people, and his spirit enforcing Ma'at, the eternal law of truth and justice. Meanwhile, in the Duat, Osiris ruled the dead with serene wisdom. The cycle was complete. Death had given rise to life. Chaos had given way to order. And the throne of Egypt, born of divine blood and sustained by divine will, stood firm upon the earth. The myth of Horus and Set is more than an epic tale of rivalry. It is an allegory for every challenge faced by rulers and citizens alike. It reminds us that justice must often be fought for, that chaos will never cease to challenge harmony, and that true kingship, be it divine or human, is not given, but earned through struggle, perseverance, and moral clarity. Even as Horus ruled the living, and Osiris reigned among the dead, another eternal cycle played out, one that governed the rhythm of day and night, light and shadow, life and decay. It was a drama not of inheritance or revenge, but of vigilance, perseverance, and the fragile balance between creation and destruction. This was the myth of Ra's nightly journey through the underworld, a story that took place beyond mortal eyes, but touched every living soul. Ra, the ancient sun god, was one of the oldest and most powerful deities in the Egyptian pantheon. He was the light of the world, the force that drove away the darkness and gave life to the earth. In the daytime, Ra sailed across the sky in his solar bark, his golden boat pulled by celestial beings. His eye watched over the land, his heat warmed the crops, and his presence banished the shadows. But Ra's power was not limitless. As the sun descended beyond the western horizon each evening, a new journey began, one of danger, transformation, and constant threat. For when Ra left the sky, he did not rest. Instead, he passed into the Duat, the Egyptian underworld, a vast and mysterious realm filled with caverns, gates, serpents, spirits, and trials. There, Ra boarded a second vessel, the Mesektet bark, and began his perilous voyage through 12 hours of night. Each hour represented a different stage of his journey, and each brought new perils. This journey was not metaphorical. It was real to the ancient Egyptians. Every sunset marked Ra's descent into darkness. Every sunrise signaled his return, victorious over death and chaos, bringing rebirth to the world once again. But Ra did not travel alone. He was accompanied by a host of divine allies, among them Ma'at, the goddess of truth and cosmic order, who stood at his side to remind him of his purpose. The god Sia, representing perception, and Heka, the force of magic, also traveled with him, as did a legion of other deities and protective spirits. Even Set, the god of chaos and storms, had a role to play here. Though reviled for his betrayal of Osiris, in the Duat, Set became the protector of Ra's boat, using his strength to defend it from its greatest threat. That threat had a name, Apophis or Epep, the colossal serpent of pure chaos. Apophis was not a god, but a primordial force of uncreation. He dwelled in the dark, churning waters of none, the abyss that existed before creation. Each night he rose from those depths to attack Ra's bark and devour the light. His goal was simple and terrifying, to halt the cycle of day and night, to drown the world in eternal darkness. Every hour of the night brought Ra closer to this inevitable confrontation. The middle of the night, the seventh hour, was the most critical, for it was here that Ra and his retinue passed through the realm of Osiris himself. In this place, the two great deities met, Ra, Lord of the Sun, and Osiris, Lord of the Dead. Their unity in this moment was essential to the survival of the world. Ra's light gave energy to the dead. Osiris's wisdom gave Ra the power to continue. In this mystical hour, the fusion of life and death occurred. The Ba, soul of Ra, merged briefly with Osiris, forming a radiant serpent-headed deity known as Ra-Osiris, a symbol of rebirth and eternal return. It was this union that allowed Ra to emerge from the darkest part of the underworld, prepared to face the storm that followed. In the 12th hour, Apophis attacked. The serpent coiled itself around the boat of Ra, snapping its jaws, darkening the sky, hissing its curses through the underworld. The boat rocked violently as chaos sought to overturn it, and here Set rose to fight. This was Set's redemption. His strength, his violence, his fire, all turned against the enemy of creation. With a great spear, Set battled Apophis, stabbing at its coils, while the gods chanted spells and cast nets woven of starlight. Thoth recited the words of power. Ma'at steadied the bark, The defenders of the sun fought not just with weapons, but with balance, with truth, with memory. At last, Apophis was wounded and cast down into the abyss, though never destroyed. For chaos cannot die. It merely retreats, waiting to strike again. Ra's boat emerged from the underworld. As he passed the final gate, the eastern horizon blushed with the first light of dawn. Ra resumed his place in the sky, once more sailing above the earth in his daylight form, spreading warmth and life to the world of the living. And so the cycle continued. The Egyptians believed that this cosmic struggle took place every single night. It was their explanation for the rising and setting of the sun, not a passive movement of celestial bodies, but a victory won anew each dawn. It taught that darkness must be faced, not feared, that even the greatest light must descend into shadow to be reborn. It also revealed something deeper about the Egyptian worldview, that creation is never guaranteed. It must be protected, nurtured, and defended, even by gods. Ra, the mighty, did not rule alone. He depended on loyalty, on courage, on the alignment of the divine order. Even Set, the god of storms, found purpose as a guardian when he fought on the side of light. This myth shaped funerary rituals, astronomical texts, temple carvings, and sacred calendars. It reminded the people that death was not an end, but a transition, a journey through shadow to the light beyond. Just as Ra emerged from the Duat, so too could the soul emerge into the field of reeds, the blessed afterlife, if they walked in truth. And so each morning, as the sun rose over the eastern cliffs and painted the desert gold, the people of Egypt knew the world had been saved again. Order had been restored. The cycle continued, not by chance, but by divine will and enduring struggle. The journey of Ra through the underworld showed us that light must be defended, even by gods. But not all dangers come from serpents in the deep. Sometimes, the threat rises from within, from the very beings Ra once cherished and protected. And so we now enter a darker chapter of Egyptian myth, the moment when the gods judged that mankind no longer deserved the gifts of creation. In the earliest age of the world, when the sun god Ra ruled not only the heavens but also the earth, he lived among mortals. The world was young. There was no separation yet between God and man. The people worshipped Ra, who gave them light, warmth, and guidance. But as generations passed, humans became arrogant. They began to murmur among themselves. Some plotted rebellion. Others whispered that Ra had grown old, that his time was fading, that the gods were not eternal. Ra heard their words, Masaibul Weda Ra. Though his body remained radiant, his spirit was weary. He had ruled for countless years, and he saw now that the very beings he had raised into civilization were turning against him. Their ingratitude, their pride, it pierced him more deeply than any serpent's fang. So Ra summoned the Ennead, the divine council of gods. He asked for their counsel. Should mankind be punished? Should the world be purged of its corruption? The gods deliberated, but it was clear. The hearts of men had turned from Ma'at, from truth, and something had to be done to restore balance. Ra's decision was swift and terrifying. He would release his wrath upon the world, not in the form of fire or flood, but in the form of a goddess. He summoned his eye. Now, the Eye of Ra was not just a symbol. It was a divine entity, an extension of Ra's power and will, often personified as a lioness or a fierce goddess. On this day, the Eye took the form of Sekhmet, the lion-headed goddess of war, vengeance, and divine fury. Sekhmet descended upon humanity like a storm. With burning eyes and bloodied claws, she hunted the rebels and the wicked. Her roar shook the desert. Her breath was hot wind. Wherever she passed, blood soaked the sand. Towns fell silent. Fields were abandoned. Those who had cursed Ra were torn apart or trampled underfoot. Sire. At first, Ra watched in silence. This was justice, he thought. The scales were being balanced. The arrogance of mortals had met its end. But as the days passed, something changed. Sekhmet did not stop. She had tasted blood, and it had awakened something deeper than justice. Rage. Her slaughter no longer distinguished the guilty from the innocent. All humanity had become prey. Ra, though he had unleashed her, realized too late that his creation might now destroy everything. The world trembled on the edge of annihilation. So the gods devised a plan to calm Sekhmet's fury and end the carnage. They brewed 7,000 jars of beer and dyed it red with ochre and pomegranate juice until it resembled blood. They poured this mixture across the fields where Sekhmet was expected to pass. When she arrived, the lioness saw what appeared to be a lake of blood. Overcome with bloodlust, she drank deeply, believing it to be the fruit of her conquest. But as she drank, the potion clouded her senses. Her rage dulled. Her limbs grew heavy. She staggered, and then she laughed. For the first time in days, her bloodlust was quenched not by violence, but by intoxication. Sekhmet fell asleep, and when she awoke, she was no longer the same goddess. The feral destroyer had faded. In her place rose a gentler form, Hathor, the goddess of joy, music, fertility, and love. The eye of Ra had transformed, as fire gives way to warmth, as wrath gives way to renewal. Humanity was spared, but not unchanged. They had come to the edge of extinction and been pulled back by the mercy of their creator. And Ra, weary of his time on earth, withdrew. He no longer walked among mortals as he once had. Instead, he took his place in the sky, sailing across the heavens by day and through the underworld by night. This myth left its mark deep in Egyptian thought. Tordo layatsayas and prilex, hipordo layatsay homak, hipordo layatsay sayatsayats, hipordo lay homak. It warned that divine patience has limits, that creation can turn against its creator, that justice, if left unchecked by mercy, becomes a fire that consumes everything. But it also offered hope that even the fiercest wrath could be turned aside, that transformation was possible, that the same goddess who brings death can also bring life, love, and renewal. Sekhmet and Hathor would both remain vital deities in Egypt's religious life. Temples to both stood across the land, each venerated in her own way, one with fierce hymns and battle drums, the other with music, dance, and laughter. Together, they represented the duality at the heart of Egyptian belief: destruction and healing, punishment and pleasure, shadow and sun. And just as Ra withdrew from the earth after that time, so too did the gods begin to step back from human affairs, dwelling more in the symbolic, in the mythic, in the hidden. The world became the realm of kings and priests, who would carry out rituals to honor the gods, to remember their stories, and to keep Ma alive. And so the myth reminds us, the gods do not abandon lightly, but neither do they tolerate betrayal. The favor of a god is a gift, but the wrath of a god is a storm. This is how the world was reshaped, not by an external enemy, but by the consequences of forgetfulness and pride. And from this moment forward, the relationship between humans and the divine would never be quite the same. Now that we've witnessed Ra's withdrawal and the dangerous power of divine judgment, we find ourselves in a world where the gods no longer walk openly among mortals, and their power is veiled in mystery, magic, and ritual. Yet even in their distance, they remain ever present, through symbols, through sacred knowledge, and through the subtle balance of the universe itself. And so we come to another defining myth, the secret name of Ra, a tale that reveals the nature of divine power and the cunning of the goddess Isis. After Ra retreated from the mortal world, his dominion remained unchallenged in the sky. He was the supreme creator, the sun itself, the eye that watched all things. His light nourished crops and burned away darkness. His breath gave life. His voice shaped the world. Keva's power was more than just physical. In ancient Egyptian thought, the true name of a being held its essence, its identity, its source of power. To know a true name was not simply to call someone. It was to hold a part of them in your will. Even the gods had names unknown to others, secret words tied to their very existence. And no name was more closely guarded than the secret name of Ra. Even among the gods, Ra's name was a mystery. He kept it hidden in his heart, and none could speak it. Not Thoth, not Horus, not even Isis. But Isis, ever the seeker of knowledge, wisdom, and magic, desired to possess that name, not from greed or cruelty, but because she knew that to protect her son Horus and to fulfill his destiny, she would need power equal to that of the sun god himself. And so Isis devised a plan. She watched Ra closely. Though he remained mighty, he had grown old. His skin sagged like the horizon at dusk. Saliva fell from his mouth as he drifted across the sky, his divine form growing weary with age. One day, as Ra walked the earth in his hidden human form, Isis quietly followed and gathered his saliva as it dripped onto the ground. Mixing it with earth and clay, she shaped it into a serpent, an invisible snake of divine essence, crafted from Ra's very body. She placed the serpent in the path where Ra would pass the next day. As he came walking, the snake struck. Hidi, it was no ordinary bite. This was a venom forged of Ra's own being, one that no god or spell could heal, because it was born from within himself. The sun god screamed. His body trembled. The heavens shook. He cried out to the gods, begging them to bring relief, but none could ease the pain. None understood what had happened, except Isis. She came forward, offering her help. Ra, writhing in agony, begged for a cure. Isis offered it, but at a price. She said, "Reveal to me your secret name. Only then will I have the power to heal you." Ra hesitated. To speak his true name was to give away part of his essence, to share his divine core with another. But the pain was unbearable. He tried to hide behind titles and epithets. "I am the maker of heaven and earth," he said. "I am the one who created the Nile, who made the mountains rise and the winds blow." But Isis was unmoved. "These are your roles," she said, "not your name." And so, broken by venom and need, Ra whispered his true name to Isis. No mortal or god ever heard it, and it was never spoken aloud, but in that moment, Isis gained a part of Ra's power. His essence now lived within her. She healed him, as promised, and he lived on. But the balance had shifted. With Ra's name hidden in her heart, Isis became the most powerful goddess in the land. Her magic grew vast. She was no longer merely the wife of Osiris or the mother of Horus. She became a sovereign force, rivaling even Ra himself. She would use this power not for domination, but for protection, for her son, for Egypt, and for the continued triumph of Ma'at over chaos. This myth reveals one of the most profound truths in Egyptian belief, that knowledge is power, and that language, names, and magic are not symbols of power, they are power. The ancient Egyptians did not separate speech from action. To name a thing was to shape it. To know a name was to hold it. Shetiwo. And so Isis, through wisdom and strategy rather than brute strength, reshaped the hierarchy of the gods. She did not strike with lightning or rage like Sekhmet. She moved with subtlety, with intellect, with an understanding of how the world truly worked. In this way, she rose to become one of the most revered figures in the Egyptian religious landscape, worshipped not just as a goddess, but as the embodiment of divine intelligence and maternal protection. Her influence spread far beyond Egypt, eventually reaching the shores of Greece and Rome, where temples to Isis stood tall, long after the old gods had faded. But in her myth lies a lesson that echoes even now. Power is not always taken by force. Sometimes, it is earned through knowing what others are afraid to reveal. And in a world where even gods conceal their names, it is those who dare to seek understanding who reshape destiny. And so Isis, having drawn from Ra the secret name that pulsed at the core of his being, rose not through brute strength or violence, but through knowledge, through the quiet power of understanding what others hide. Her magic was now unparalleled, her influence unshakable. But even with such power in her grasp, her heart remained steady in its purpose, to protect her son Horus and to see justice done. Yet Egypt's myths are not tales of endless triumph. They do not present the gods as flawless or the world as simple. In every divine story, there are layers of ambition, of loss, of love, of risk, and there's always a cost. Even the gods, though immortal, are bound to the laws of balance. The truth must be weighed, the soul must be judged. And so we move now from battles and strategy, from roaring lionesses and secret names, into the quiet, solemn chamber of eternity, the realm where every human heart is tested. This is the story of the weighing of the heart, the great judgment that awaited all who pass from this world into the next. Rasted, hast, and Shasam. Batita bi Basid, Gaba. To the ancient Egyptians, death was not an end. It was a passage, a journey through the hidden lands of the Duat, through night and darkness, where the soul was led by Anubis, the jackal-headed guide of the dead. The body would be embalmed, wrapped in linen, protected with amulets and sacred words, but the spirit, the Ba and the Ka, the twin parts of the soul, had to continue the journey alone. At the heart of the afterlife stood a hall of judgment, vast and silent, lit by the presence of the gods. In its center stood the god Anubis, calm and unshaken, black as the sacred soil of the Nile, whose steady hands held the scales of fate. The soul of the deceased would be brought before the 42 judges, each representing a law, a principle, a divine truth. And at the final moment, the heart of the soul would be placed upon the scale, opposite the feather of Ma'at, the feather of truth. This feather was not symbolic. It was literal and weightless, a representation of perfect balance. If the heart, filled with regret or wrongdoing, was heavy, if it outweighed the feather, it would be cast into the jaws of Ammit, the devourer. Part crocodile, part lion, part hippopotamus, she waited beside the scales, ready to consume the damned and erase them from existence. No afterlife, no rebirth, no memory. But if the heart was pure, if the soul had lived in accordance with Ma'at, with truth and justice, then the scales would tip in balance. The soul would be welcomed into the field of reeds, a paradise of abundance and peace, where loved ones waited and the sun shone eternally. Here, in this myth, we find the deepest expression of Egyptian belief, not in punishment or reward, but in harmony. Life to them was preparation. Every choice, every word spoken, every act of generosity or cruelty added weight to the heart. They believed that the soul remembered everything. Nothing was lost, and nothing could be hidden from the gods. The Book of the Dead, their sacred guide through the afterlife, includes the negative confession, a series of declarations spoken by the soul before the divine court. I have not stolen. I have not lied. I have not murdered. I have not caused pain. I have not polluted the waters. I have not failed the gods. These were not commandments. They were hopes. They were the soul's last chance to claim its innocence and be found worthy. And so, the weighing of the heart became not just a myth, but a model, a guide for how to live, a daily reminder that one's actions would echo beyond the tomb. Even pharaohs, buried in splendor, could not escape this judgment. Their hearts, too, would be weighed. Their legacies, too, would face the scales. In this way, the myth ensured that all were equal before truth: farmer, priest, noble, or king. For in the hall of Ma'at, only one measure counted: the weight of the heart. This vision of death, solemn, just, and deeply human, reflected the Egyptian soul. It gave structure to mourning, purpose to life, and hope beyond the grave. It was not enough to appease the gods with offerings and temples. One had to live well. One had to speak truth. One had to bring harmony to the world while there was still breath. And so the people of the Nile walked gently through life, their eyes fixed not just on the horizon of the sun, but on the moment when they too would face the feather, when their names, spoken in offerings or forgotten in dust, would pass into eternity, or be swallowed into silence. Thus the myth lived not only in tombs and texts, but in every gesture of kindness, every act of restraint, every word offered with honesty. In the stillness of that hall, in the flicker of judgment, the heart was revealed. And with it, the truth of the soul. With the weighing of the heart, the soul's journey found either peace or oblivion. The balance was restored or devoured. Yet long before a soul could even approach that final scale, life itself had to begin. And so, to understand the foundation of all things, we must return to the very beginning, the creation of the world, as told in the sacred myths of Heliopolis. In the time before time, there was only darkness, no sky, no land, no gods, only the still, endless waters of none, the primeval chaos. From this infinite void, a single thought stirred. From that thought emerged the first act of creation, a mound rising from the water, a single point of stability in the formless deep. Upon that mound appeared Atum, the self-created one. He was not born nor made, but came into being by his own will, both male and female, complete within himself. Atum stood alone in the silence. Yet creation cannot remain solitary. Desiring companionship and the continuation of life, he brought forth his children, not by union, but by shedding part of himself. He spat forth Shu, the god of air, and vomited out Tefnut, the goddess of moisture. They were the first divine pair, and they embraced in the void. Shu lifted the body of Nut, the sky, away from Geb, the earth, forming the space between. In this separation, the world as we know it was born. Light entered. The winds began to breathe. Waters gathered into rivers. Land rose. Trees and stars, mountains and creatures, all found their place. From nothing, a cosmos. The worn, Nut and Geb's love endured even as they were kept apart. Every night, Nut swallowed the sun, and every morning she gave birth to it again, allowing Ra's eternal journey to begin. But their union had also birthed more gods: Osiris, Isis, Set, and Nephthys, the children who would go on to enact the great dramas of the divine world. Thus, the gods of Egypt were not external to creation. They were woven into its very fabric. Sunlight, soil, air, and water made divine. And from their relationships came both harmony and conflict, fertility and famine. The balance of creation was not passive. It had to be maintained through ritual, order, and understanding. This is how the Egyptians viewed their place in the cosmos, not as separate from the gods, but living within their story. Every sunrise, every season, every flood of the Nile was a retelling of that first emergence from none. Each temple echoed the shape of the primeval mound. Each priest mirrored Adam's breath. The world was not simply made. It was being made still in every sacred act. But with creation came tension. Balance required opposition. And sometimes, even the divine order could be broken. One such moment came not in the heavens, but here on earth, in a tale both intimate and mysterious, the story of the dismemberment of Osiris. This version is older, stranger, and woven deeply into ritual and memory. It is said that Set, jealous of his brother Osiris's rule, did not simply trap him in a coffin, but cut him into pieces to ensure he could never return. These parts were not just thrown away, they were scattered across the entire land of Egypt. Each piece, a fragment of divine kingship, fell into a different district, a nome, becoming sacred to the people who lived there. Isis, again, went searching. But this was no ordinary journey. In each location, she found not just a limb or bone, but a story. A sacred hill, a river's bend, a temple built over the place where Osiris's foot or heart was laid to rest. Each site became a center of worship, a living map of resurrection across the kingdom, and the one piece she could not recover, his phallus, was honored more than any other. Lost to the Nile and swallowed by a fish, it was replaced by a golden replica, forged by Isis's own hands, and with it she conceived Horus. But here's what makes this myth deeper than its parts. The act of collecting Osiris's body was not only about mourning, it was the first embalming, the origin of mummification. Anubis, the jackal-headed god of the dead, wrapped Osiris in linen, scented him with oils, and performed the rites that would become the heart of Egyptian funerary practice. Osiris was made whole through care, magic, and memory, and by being pieced together again, he became something more, the first to be resurrected, the king of the dead, the hope of the living. Every mummified body that followed, every tomb, every carved sarcophagus, was a reenactment of this myth. The wrapping of limbs, the placing of amulets, the opening of the mouth, all of it pointed back to Isis, to Anubis, to that first act of sacred restoration. In this way, the myth was not just a story, it was an eternal promise, that even in death there is a path forward, that what is broken can be made whole, that what is scattered can be gathered again. But myths, like the gods themselves, rarely remain fixed. There are many versions of Egypt's sacred stories, each echoing across time and place. And in one of the oldest and most mysterious, the roles of creator and father are passed on from Adam to a different divine power, Ptah, the god of craftsmen, architecture, and thought. In the theology of Memphis, Ptah is not merely a builder of the world, he is its designer. Here, creation happens not through breath or bodily fluids, but through the power of the heart and tongue. Ptah thinks the world into being with his heart, the seat of will and desire, and speaks it into existence with his tongue. Every object, every god, every force is named, and in the naming it becomes real. Ptah is he who gave life to all the gods and their kas, through this heart and this tongue, say the ancient texts. And by this account, even Atum himself was shaped by Ptah's will. This vision of creation shifts the meaning of power once again, from force to word. Just as Isis gained Ra's name to wield his strength, Ptah uses speech as the first tool. It is a reminder that creation is not only physical, but intellectual, that ideas, spoken with clarity and intention, can shape the world. It also reflects something essential in Egyptian culture, the reverence for writing, for language, for the scribe who records what others forget. The god, Thoth, keeper of time and measure, is born from this same logic. Writing was not just a skill, it was a sacred act. Every hieroglyph carried divine energy. And so, between Ptah's word, Atum's breath, and Isis's cunning, we find a full circle of divine expression, will, action, and magic interwoven. But not all myths concern gods and cosmic creation. Some whisper of more intimate, stranger moments, episodes of divine mischief and mystery. One such tale is that of the quarrel between Horus and Set over lettuce, a deceptively simple story that carries unexpected depth. In this version, the conflict between the two gods shifts from battlefield to banquet. The two rivals sit at a feast before the other gods, trying to prove who is more worthy. Set, in an act meant to shame Horus, commits an act of domination, violating him as a way to assert power. Horus, horrified, seeks help from Isis, who sets a trap in return. She gathers Horus's seed, hides it in Set's food, lettuce, said to be sacred to the god Min, and tricks Set into consuming it. Later, when the gods call a magical court to test whose seed lies in whom, it is revealed that Horus remains untouched, while Set carries the mark of his own humiliation. Laughter erupts. The truth is reversed. The gods side with Horus. His cleverness, not brute force, wins the day. This myth, as strange and bold as it is, serves many roles. Lefai Seb's R'ard, it inverts power. It challenges the idea that dominance defines strength. And in its humor and scandal, it reminds us that even gods are flawed, unpredictable, and full of surprises. Egyptian mythology does not sanitize its deities. They are not perfect beings in distant skies. They are tangled with the same passions and contradictions that define human life. That is why these stories endured. Why they were carved into stone and whispered at temple gates. Why, thousands of years later, they still feel alive. And so, as we pass from creation to judgment, from death to resurrection, from skyboats to secret names, we begin to see the full shape of Egypt's sacred landscape, not as a straight line, but as a cycle, a spiral, a flow, like the Nile itself. Each myth feeds the next. Each god bears witness to another. And at the center of it all stands Ma'at, balance, truth, order. The invisible thread tying everything together, a Talan. Because without Ma'at, the sun does not rise. The heart cannot be weighed. The tongue cannot speak the world into form. She is the breath behind the breath, the silence that gives meaning to sound, the measure that lets gods and humans know what is just. And when Ma'at falters, when her feather trembles, the stories begin again. The gods rise, the myths return, and the world is remade. The world is remade again and again through story, through ritual, through the repeating cycles of myth and meaning. And as the myths flow onward, one god appears again and again at the threshold between the seen and the unseen, the known and the mysterious. Thoth, the ibis-headed scribe of the gods, the master of time, of speech, of writing, of balance. He is never the loudest figure in these tales, never the one to strike with spear or claw. And yet it is Thoth who records every judgment, who calms disputes between gods, who heals the wounded, who names what must be named. In a world where power can be hidden in a word, and life shaped by the breath of a phrase, Thoth is indispensable. And it is through him that the next story unfolds. The tale of how the goddess Nut defied the heavens to give birth to gods. At the beginning of creation, Nut, the sky, arched above her lover Geb, the earth, and longed to embrace him again. But Ra, the sun god, forbade it. He had learned through prophecy that Nut's children would one day challenge his rule, and so he cursed her. Nut would bear no child on any day of the year. The calendar at this time was a clean 360 days, and Ra had made sure there was no room for life to slip through the cracks. Nut, desperate to give birth, turned to Thoth for help. Thoth, clever beyond measure, devised a plan. He approached the moon god, Khonsu, and challenged him to a game of Senet, the sacred board game beloved by gods and mortals alike. They played for light. Thoth's wager was time itself. With every game Thoth won, he took a sliver of moonlight. And with each sliver, he shaped something new. 5 days added to the end of the year, days outside of Ra's curse, days not bound by fate. And in those secret days, Nut gave birth to her 5 children, Osiris on the first, Horus the elder on the second, Set on the third, Isis on the fourth, and Nephthys on the fifth. These were not just births. They were moments that altered the shape of the world. Osiris, the just king, Isis, the great magician, Set, the bringer of chaos, Nephthys, the mourner and guardian, and Horus, the hidden one, who would later be confused with his nephew of the same name. From Nut's defiance and Thoth's ingenuity, the divine lineage was born. But Thoth did more than rearrange time. In later myths, it is Thoth who speaks the words that repair Horus's eye. Thoth who measures the hours of the night as Ra sails through the Duat. Thoth who keeps record of every soul, weighed in the hall of Ma'at. He is the quiet mind behind the acts of gods, the ink on the scroll of eternity. It is no accident that writing, in Egypt, was considered sacred. Every scroll, every carving, every word spoken in ritual echoed Thoth's original magic. He had not merely invented writing, he had drawn it out of the fabric of the universe. The hieroglyph was not just a symbol, it was a force, shaped by breath and intention. And with this, Egypt became a civilization obsessed with memory, with permanence, with speaking things into stone so they could endure beyond sand and wind. Thoth's influence flows beneath every other myth. When Isis searches for Osiris's pieces, she chants words he taught her. When the sun falters in the Duat, it is Thoth who speaks order back into chaos. When Ra begins to fade, it is Thoth who reminds the cosmos how to hold together. He is not a warrior, not a king, not a judge. But he is the reason there is anything left to fight for, rule over, or judge. And still, the stories do not stop. The gods continue to move in and out of time. And there is one more who carries the weight of life and death, not with scroll or sword, but with silence. The goddess Nephthys. She is often overlooked, the shadow to Isis's light. Sister of Isis, wife of Set, mother to Anubis in some tales, Nephthys dwells on the edges of myth. She appears when the dead are laid to rest. She weeps at Osiris's tomb. She holds the hands of mourners, whispers to widows, guards the threshold between life and what lies beyond. Hers is not the power of revenge or victory, but of enduring love, of grief that does not end but deepens into care. In the rituals of embalming, it is Nephthys and Isis together, who call the soul back to the body, who lift Osiris with their voices, who create the stillness in which resurrection can occur. They are not rivals, but twin forces, one of magic, one of mourning. It is said that when they cried for Osiris, their wails became the first dirge, the first funeral song, and from that moment on, every cry of the bereaved echoed their divine lament. Through Nephthys, the Egyptians learned that death was not only a separation, but a connection, that to grieve was not weakness, but devotion, that to remember the dead was to keep them close, even across the veil. And in this, perhaps, lies the true power of the Egyptian mythic vision, not in the triumph of gods, but in the memory of them. Not in the endless repetition of battles in creation, but in the way those stories gave structure to the smallest acts of human life. When a body was wrapped in linen, Osiris was remembered. When a woman sang a lullaby, Isis stirred. When a scribe dipped his brush into ink, Thoth's spirit moved through his fingers. When someone wept at a grave, Nephthys knelt beside them. The myths were not just stories. They were how one lived, how one died, and how one came to rest in the arms of eternity. Even now, beneath the sands and ruins, the names remain. Carved into stone walls in temples long abandoned, painted on the lids of coffins, inscribed in papyrus scrolls, hidden away in dark tombs. The gods speak still, if one knows how to listen. And if you listen closely, not only to the grand voices of kings and sun gods, but to the quiet ones, the scribes, the mourners, the ones who walk the night beside the dead, you'll hear them. Because Egypt never truly buried its gods. It built them into everything. And in doing so, it gave them a kind of immortality no chaos could unmake. Egyptian mythology is not a closed book of forgotten tales. It is a living architecture of belief, memory, and meaning. Through gods who rise and fall, through creation and destruction, through the balance of Ma'at and the chaos that threatens it, These stories reflect the Egyptian soul, deeply rooted in order, endlessly fascinated with the mysteries of life and death, and profoundly respectful of the unseen forces that shape the world. What makes Egyptian myth unique is not only its vast pantheon or elaborate funerary rites, but its core understanding that the divine is woven into everything: the wind that blows across the Nile, the ink of a scribe's brush, the whisper of a mourner at a grave. Gods are not distant rulers. They are present in birth and burial, in flood and flame, in silence and in song, and they are not perfect. They are wise and wrathful, cunning and compassionate, jealous and just. They mirror the complexity of life itself. These myths were not mere stories. They were sacred tools. They gave the people of the Nile a way to explain the rhythms of the world, to guide their actions, to honor their dead, and to shape their civilization. In tomb walls and temple stones, in songs passed from priest to initiate, in the whispered prayers of farmers and kings alike, the myths endured. And even now, as the sands shift over the ruins of ancient Egypt, the stories still speak, not just of gods and kings, but of balance, of truth, of memory. They teach us that power lies not only in strength but in wisdom, that every act ripples through time, that what is lost can be found again, that the world, like the sun, is forever reborn.